Well, hello, Ospreys. Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 1 and McDuff Lives 3, and also just plain McDuff on Facebook. Yes, we're broadcasting on 3 channels right now because we have to be a little bit cagey in case we get a strike, so we don't lose contact with everybody. So thanks for signing up, both at McDuff Lives 1 and 2 and 3. We're not using 2 right now, but we might need to anytime, especially if somebody says one of those bad words like, oh, I won't say it. I'm not going to say it. Sergeant Stadenko, don't say it either. I don't want you messing up my show, Sergeant. You have a bit of an attitude, and I've noticed, and yeah, also kind of a lard ass. Yeah, right. Are you still doing the murder hornet thing? I don't know, but you might be onto something there, Sarge. Housatonic Live. Good morning, Mark, and looking forward to our show on Wednesday night. Isn't it Wednesday night, right? Uh, hey, Corky is here, and he is being a very good eek Osprey, as is Kathy Sue. Good morning. And Jimmy Beam, hello to you. Thanks, everybody, for being with me. I'm looking forward to this show because I wanted to talk about, this idea of, well, what it's called Die Spinne in German, or Die Spinne, if you want to say it in American English. And it just means the spider, but it's also a metaphor for a group, very much like the bad guys in the James Bond movies had this thing called Spectre. And what the first thing I want to do is to go and just Google it, and together we can explore what the world knows about the Spinne. And okay, yeah, I'm going to keep the murder hornets away from my corn. That's a good plan, Sergeant. Yeah, you should come by and help me with my gardening. By the way, I really could use your help, and the pay is absolutely great. Um, you know, Free food, right? I'll never heil again, said Otto. And Vic Morrow is here. Vic Morrow, you are one of my favorite actors of my childhood, and I want to tell you, you and and all the guys at Combat. Rick Jason also, shout out. But Vic, I think you really were the heart of the show, and I appreciate that. Dr. Spector was a oh my God, David's here, and he's always got the and Aaron Adler. Hello, Aaron. It's so good to have you with us, and trust you're doing well. I'm delighted to hear from you. Hello, David, and everybody else. Okay, so let's try to answer some of these good questions. The first thing I want to do is just as an exercise to go to Google and see what that shows us. So let me go over there. And I'm going to share the screen with you so you can go through this, or you'll see me go through it anyway. Because this is my question: are we still in denial? Do we continue to believe that this organization did not exist? By believing in the Bond stories as stories, are we ruling out the possibility that there really is a specter? That's where I want to make some progress this morning, if we can. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So let's see if this will work. So in Google, we put Die Spinne. Okay. And this is what I thought we would get. Let me just highlight the point I want to make. Die Spinne in Wikipedia, German for the spider, was a post-World War II organization thought to have helped certain Nazi war criminals escape justice. Okay, thought to. Okay, that's kind of remote from did. It's kind of, leaving it in the hypothetical situation, right? Okay, the next one. uh, Die Spinne was a post-World War II organization thought to have helped certain Nazi war criminals escape justice. Okay, starting to see a pattern here. Samim I.O. says Die Spinne was a post-World War II organization thought to have helped certain Nazi war criminals escape justice. Oh my goodness. And then the next one is about a piece of art in the National Gallery of Art. So I'm starting to feel like they don't really want us to know much about Die Spinne. But let's go, if we can, to this said Wikipedia page and see what they can say about it. And you will see our friend Otto Skorzeny there enjoying a smoke between his various escapades. All right, Die Spinne was a post-World War II organization that thought to have helped certain Nazi war criminals escape justice. Its existence is still debated today. All right, well, let's get this debate along. Let's move this debate along, okay? Because it's time we straighten this out. It is believed by some historians to be a different name or branch of Odessa, an organization established during the collapse of Nazi Germany, similar to Kameradenwerk and Der Bruderschaft, devoted to helping German war criminals flee Europe. It was led in part by Otto Skorzeny, Hitler's commando chief, as well as Nazi intelligence officer Reinhard Gehlen. Die Spinne helped as many as 600 former SS men escape from Germany to Francoist Spain, Juan Perón's Argentina, Paraguay, Chile, Bolivia, the Middle East, and other countries. Die Spinne was established by Otto Skorzeny using the aliases Robert Steinbacher and Otto Steinbauer, and supported by either Nazi funds or, according to some sources, Austrian intelligence. Now, that's something I need to look into. Austrian intelligence after World War II. Whoa, what role do they play? Just a footnote for me. I'm going to need to look into that. Later, Skorzeny, Gehlen, and their network of collaborators had gained significant influence in parts of Europe and Latin America. Skorzeny traveled between Francoist Spain and Argentina, where he acted as an advisor to President Juan Perón and bodyguard of Eva Perón. Well, that was not a good choice, Eva. No, you didn't want to have him. No, bad idea. While fostering an ambition for the Fourth Reich, centered in Latin America. And there's Jim Mars's great book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, which we read here on the channel about 2 years ago. And I would love to have it available to you, but YouTube has struck all of those 900 readings. On that point, if anybody ever wants to volunteer, come here and help me organize my book readings into something that we could put back up on the web, I would be delighted to have your help. I just cannot do it myself, and it's a time-consuming thing, but, the food's pretty good, so let me know if you are interested in coming for a little bit of a sabbatical and a little bit of hard work, too. That'd be good. Okay, back to the story. The Madrid office was built up what was referred to as a sort of fascist international, per Tettens, whoever he is. According to Tettens, the German leadership also included Dr. Hans Globke, who had written the official commentary on the Nuremberg laws. Globke had the important position of director of the German Chancellery, serving as advisor to Konrad Adenauer, and we've talked about him many times. Someone that, according to Goleniewski approached Adenauer, warning him about you shouldn't hire Reinhard Gehlen. He's a fascist. He's a bad guy. I mean, he's a Nazi. Then you don't want to hire him. I don't know how true that is. Goleniewski seems to be one of the most difficult figures to fix in history that we've got, but sure is tantalizing to keep studying him. lot more for me to read on both of these guys, Skorzeny and Goliaski, and how they come together in talking to Adenauer. Okay, and then you see that they were coordinating with Francisco Franco. They had uh, helped him, the same guys that had helped him in the Spanish Civil War. And then they used Die Spinne to allow notorious Nazi concentration camp Dr. Joseph Mengele to escape to Argentina. Skorzeny requested assistance from Alfred Krupp, who had controlled 138 private concentration camps in Nazi Germany. What? Private concentration camps? You mean not official German government? You mean just slave labor for private interests? Okay. Uh-huh. All right. Didn't know that before. A country which harbored a strong pro-Nazi political element throughout World War II. Um, okay, so you get the story, right? Anywhere in here does it say anything about Rockefellers? No. It just says, well, they helped 600 SS guys, to get away, and they got away. And, he tried to get some money from Krupp, but did he say anything at all in this article about Rockefellers? No. Well, now let's go back to our trusty executive intelligence review articles, which I love to read. I'm going to now go back over to here. Let me come back on the screen for a second. Okay, I see a lot of good comments, and you guys are really, really getting into the history of it, and it's so important. So important that we share this. Talk about it amongst yourselves and spread it with your friends because we need to get past this denial. Okay. We know about Reinhard Gehlen, right? We've been studying him for 4 or 5 years. We know that this stuff is real and that it has infected our government. We know it. So let's nail down this case so that you can't refute it and make sure the American people are aware that we have been subverted by this evil force. You want to call it Die Spinne? You might as well call it Spectre. All right. This is a long article, and I want to read as much as I can of it. I will have to stop from time to time because it is kind of long, and I might not get even halfway through it today, but it's so important. I'm going to show it to you on the screen share here. Okay, this article was actually written in 1976 and published way back then. In 1976, I was just starting law school. I didn't know any of this stuff, and of course, none of us did. But the scholars that have worked with Lyndon LaRouche over the years have done so much work to get this information together that I feel like all I have to do now is just share what they've done and add some comments and make corrections as necessary, which I need your help with. So, but let's get into this article because I think it's really, really going to help us unpack the troubles we're facing today. International Terrorism Report, Die Spinne, How Rockefeller Kept the Third Reich Alive. In the early summer, a TWA jet is hijacked by Croatian Ustashi. In Argentina, there's a sudden and nightmarish revival of Nazism. In Washington, D.C., a former Chilean government official is assassinated. In the Caribbean, a wave of terrorism by the CIA's Cuban gusanos culminates in the brutal bombing murder of 73 persons aboard a jet off Barbados. These events shocked the world into awareness that Die Spinne, the fascist network of international terrorists run by the Rockefeller brothers since World War II, not only continues to exist, but now plays a preeminent role in the Rockefeller, Kissinger, and Carter foreign policy. With a policy now exclusively directed to subjugation and genocide against developing sector nations and the earliest possible nuclear collision with the Soviet Union, the Rockefeller-dominated Atlanticists have pulled Die Spinne out of its decade-long détente period of inactivity, during which they unsuccessfully tried to impose, quote, fascism with a human face. Die Spinne was a loose designation for the post-war remnants of the secret police and covert intelligence apparatus of the defeated Axis powers, especially the Nazis, who were protected and reorganized by Standard Oil's Alan Dulles from his OSS station in Switzerland, Nelson Rockefeller as coordinator of inter-American affairs in Argentina, German Occupation Commissioner John J. McCloy Sr., and others, using such notable war criminals as Abwehr Eastern Front Intelligence Chief Reinhard Gehlen and SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny. Skorzeny's son-in-law relationship to Hitler's 1933-37 finance minister, Anglo-American puppet Hjalmar Schacht, attests to Die Spinne's roots in the secret alliance between Anglo-American financiers and their German counterparts, notably the secret cartel arrangements between Standard Oil and IG Farben. The Rockefeller Group's Dulles brothers intervened in the closing months of the war to wholly co-opt the nest of originally British agents in the Abwehr, Bundeswehr, SS, and Eastern European fascist apparats to form the core of Die Spinne. Throughout the period of the Cold War, the Spinne network was employed in covert corporate and CIA intelligence projects, especially paramilitary operations like the Hungarian uprising of 1956. Die Spinne's original constituents, which included the Lebanese Phalange out of the Nazis' Brandenburg Division, were significantly replenished by the addition of veterans such as CIA Cold War operations in the 1950s, spiritual crusade to roll back the Iron Curtain, the French Black Feet of the Algerian Secret Army Organization, the CIA's Taiwan and South Korean dictatorships, Reverend Moon, and large numbers of anti-Castro Cuban exiles after the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion. After 1963, and the Rockefeller Group's putsch assassination of President John F. Kennedy, in which principally gusanos were used, the Rockefeller Group deactivated Die Spinne in favor of the, quote, fascism with a human face policy, championed by such left fascist elements as the Institute for Policy Studies, created in that year. The hardcore fascist network was not entirely inactive. The gusanos and other elements have functioned as paramilitary assassins and enforcers throughout the Rockefellers' Latin American plantation. U.S. Labor Party organizers in North America have uncovered broad networks of capos in industrial plants throughout the American Midwest, preponderantly Ustashi from Yugoslavia. By the way, Ustashi would be from the Croatian part of what used to be then Yugoslavia. A reactivation of Die Spinne on a broad scale has occurred in connection with their international use against debt-ridden third world nations and the nations of the Warsaw Pact. Of Cold War operations, the Hungarian Revolt of 1956 was Die Spinne's most famous. Amid a full deployment of British Fabian and similar operatives to destabilize Eastern Europe's communist parties following Khrushchev's de-Stalinization speech. The Gehlen Organization's Special Forces, parentheses, former Waffen-SS and Brandenburg Division cadre, covertly invaded Hungary and linked up with the old fascist comrades of the Arrow Cross Party, Hungary's indigenous fascist party, which the Nazis used during the occupation, to conduct a wave of sabotage and assassinations. It was these elements of Die Spinne which formed the core of the so-called Hungarian freedom fighters. The use of today's revived and expanded Die Spinne is typified in the Christian Phalange's butchery in the Lebanon Civil War, which continues to be the prime hotspot in the U.S.-Soviet confrontation planning of Henry Kissinger and the advisors to Jimmy Carter. The Phalange were originally part of the Nazi Brandenburg Division, created by Admiral Canaris, a British agent who headed Nazi military intelligence. Is this getting confusing? All right. Admiral Canaris, a British agent who headed Nazi military intelligence. In other words, he was boss of Gehlen. The Phalange was originally part of the Nazi Brandenburg Division. And the Brandenburg Division is hailed as the original special forces, the one that pulled off the raid on Eben Email, I think it's called, the Belgian fort that was key to defending the Belgian frontier in the Nazi blitzkrieg. Interesting organization in that it was not comprised of Aryans. It was comprised of people of different nations and colors and nationalities, specifically to take advantage of the possibility that they could operate behind enemy lines in foreign countries and do their work as if they were natives, which they might have been. But the Brandenburgers is a organization that is looked to by U.S. Special Forces as the first model, and so you can see, it's a direct line, and I think if we were to look closely at the first U.S. Special Forces, we might find some Brandenburgers in there. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Okay, so it's fascinating that this was created by Canaris and not directly by Hitler or Himmler. The Phalange were taken over after the war by the former SS Sturmbannführer Otto Scarface Skorzeny and his Standard Oil-funded and Madrid-based ADSAP organization of former Waffen-SS. After Nasser's 1952 coup in Egypt, CIA Chief Allen Dulles and Yalmar Schacht arranged for ADSAP to train Egyptian intelligence. Do we have a ADSAP spelled out somewhere? Oh, I don't see it. After Nasser's 1952 coup in Egypt, CIA Chief Allen Dulles and Yalmar Schacht arranged for ADSAP to train Egyptian intelligence, which in turn trained the Lebanese Phalange. Israeli intelligence agents infiltrated as, quote, escaped Nazis, unquote, into Egyptian intelligence by the CIA after 1956 wound up as liaisons with the Lebanese Phalange. So the CIA took Israeli intelligence agents and pretended that they were escaped Nazis and put them into the Egyptian intelligence service. Okay. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and Attorney General Edward Levi have taken the place of the Dulles brothers as Die Spinne's masters. Well, now we know who it is. It's Kissinger. The command structure extends down through scenario design and policy direction at the levels of the National Security Council, the Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, the Hudson Institute, and the Hoover Institute of War, Revolution, and Peace, with memberships drawn largely from the Rockefeller right-wing corporate circles. For such paramilitary operations as Lebanon and the destabilization campaign against the pro-development governments of the Caribbean, Rockefeller Intelligence Control and Field Command agents in the CIA provide operational coordination. Carlos-type terrorism, Carlos the Jackal in France, of course, and assassinations and much of Die Spinne's gun and drug running is coordinated through Interpol, the international private police body which interfaces with local police and interior ministries. The Rockefeller Group policy makers. Allen and John Foster Dulles were the Rockefeller family's chief troubleshooters. Both played major political roles throughout the 1920s and 30s in the rearming of Germany by night policy, premised on using the Wehrmacht as a weapon against the Soviet Union and the working class of Europe. The Dulles brothers were also instrumental in the post-war creation and deployment of the Spinne network, assassins, and paramilitary groups. Both brothers had extensive business connections with pro-Nazi German industrialists before the war. Both were senior partners in Standard Oil's chief law firm, Sullivan and Cromwell, which enjoyed a reciprocal relationship with the German law firm of Albert and Westrick, one of whose senior partners, Dr. Gerhard Alois Westrick, was simultaneously Hitler's financial agent, an Abwehr spymaster in the United States, and Sullivan and Cromwell's German representative. What? He was an Abwehr spymaster at the same time he was the German representative of Sullivan and Cromwell? So he's representing Standard Oil while he's spying on Standard Oil and the U.S. military. Okay. As a result, the Dulles law firm acquired 3 major German concerns as Standard Oil cartel partners. Among them was the, quote, murderous IG Farbenindustrie, which was, with the Kruppwerks, the principal user of concentration camp labor for the Nazis' blitzkrieg economy. Farben was the creator of Zyklon B gas for exterminating worn-out slaves and other, quote, useless eaters. Until 1944, Allen Dulles was also a director of the J. Henry Schroeder Banking Corporation with Avery Rockefeller. This was one of the several interlocks between the Rockefeller Group and members of the banking empire of later SS Gruppenführer Baron Kurt von Schroeder, who was the main assistant to Reichsbank head and later Nazi finance minister Hjalmar Schacht in the early 1930s period of loan flotation for the rearmament of Germany and for the Hitler Bounty Slush Fund, raised from German industrialists to put Hitler in power in 1933. Allen Dulles used his wartime post as chief of the Office of Strategic Services in Switzerland and OSS chief of Secret Intelligence as a cover for maintaining liaison between the Rockefeller's group private intelligence operations and those of their secret German allies. When the Soviets broke the back of the Nazi war machine, leading members of the Abwehr military intelligence and the SS turned to Allen Dulles for preservation. One, together with Nelson Rockefeller, head of intelligence in the Western Hemisphere as coordinator of inter-American affairs, Dulles organized a 3-tiered escape system based upon wartime joint intelligence operations. 1, an underwater canal or escape route leading into the safe havens of Spain and Argentina. 2, a system for providing lesser criminals, especially Eastern European Nazi collaborators, with false identities and refugee relief in the displaced persons camps of Europe. And 3, the formation of a nucleus of SS and Abwehr dirty tricks experts around General Reinhard Gehlen, former head of Abwehr intelligence on the Eastern Front, and around SS Sturmbannführer Otto Scarface Skorzeny, Hitler's model Aryan soldier. With the election of President Dwight Eisenhower in 1952, the Dulles brothers were put in charge of both the covert and diplomatic side of U.S. foreign policy machinery. As Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles announced a policy of boldness and a spiritual crusade for the liberation of the captive peoples of Eastern Europe. Allen Dulles, as both CIA Director and Director of Central Intelligence, wait a minute, I think that's the same thing, isn't it? Utilized his Die Spinne terrorists to initiate a wave of destabilization operations against the Warsaw Pact and the progressive Third World nations. As the Rockefeller family's chief enforcer, Nelson Rockefeller is the ultimate Führer of international Die Spinne operations and thermonuclear war crazies. In his World War II role as coordinator of inter-American affairs, overseeing Western Hemisphere intelligence operations of the FBI and his own State Department network, Nelson Rockefeller repeatedly intervened to defend the corporate intelligence operations of his business partners, parentheses, IG Farben, ITT, etc., who supported extensive networks of Abwehr and SS operations in Latin America. Under his protection, Nazis actually organized standing armies in Latin America's southern cone. In 1945, President Truman finally fired Nelson Rockefeller with a virtual charge of treason, parentheses, insubordination, for his role in engineering the creation of Argentine dictator Juan Perón's fascist regime, which provided a safe haven for over 100,000 Nuremberg criminals delivered by Allen Dulles from Europe. With Dean Acheson, Allen Dulles, and others, Nelson had led the Rockefeller Group's factional battles to wrest control over the U.S. intelligence community. In 1954, Rockefeller was appointed Special Assistant to the President for Foreign Affairs, equivalent to what is now the Special Advisor for National Security, in which capacity he played a direct oversight role in CIA Gehlen Organization operations in Eastern Europe, the 1954 Guatemalan coup that was organized out of his family's United Fruit Company, etc. Rockefeller initiated the Office of Public Safety of the Agency for International Development at this time to train elite Gestapo-type police agencies in 40 countries. Through this USAID program and the Rockefeller-financed Interpol private police organization, okay, I just have to wait a minute. Rockefeller finances the Interpol. Okay, well, where is it not clear yet the involvement of the Rockefellers in these fascist and Nazi activities? I don't know. Through this U.S. aid program and the Rockefeller-financed Interpol, thousands of former Waffen SS were incorporated into the police establishments of Latin America and the Third World. Rockefeller also used his post to create the Hoover Commission Task Force on Intelligence Activities, led by General Mark Clark and former President Herbert Hoover, which recommended the creation of the Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, one of the chief coordinating bodies of the current Die Spinne activation. Isn't that wild? We've been talking about the FISA court, the FISA board, and Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board now being tagged as an operator of Die Spinne, or at least activating it. A key figure in Rockefeller's post-war American century was John J. McCloy, a virtual honorary member of the Rockefeller family who had served variously as chairman of the First National City Bank, of Chase Manhattan, and of the Rockefeller Foundation. McCloy was sent as U.S. military governor and high commissioner to Germany in 1949 to direct the rearmament of West Germany as an anti-Soviet buffer and to speed up the process of reintegrating Nazis into the military and government. McCloy directed the formation of the puppet government of his brother-in-law, Konrad Adenauer, and with the political leverage proceeded to liquidate the Nuremberg prosecution apparatus. As a first step, McCloy gained immediate release of all imprisoned industrialists, including IG Farben executives Alfred Krupp, Hjalmar Schacht, etc., to enlist them in the West German, quote, Wirtschaftswunder, or economic miracle. He then had most of the convicted SS released, including mass murderers awaiting execution, many of whom were funneled into the CIA Gehlen organization, where their skills were enlisted for Cold War operations against the Warsaw Pact. McCloy later gained notoriety as the Rockefellers' ranking appointee to the Warren Commission, where he assured a, quote, lone assassin cover-up of President John F. Kennedy's murder by Rockefeller die Spinne operatives. The man popularly known as the author of the Cold War containment doctrine against the Soviets and its American century rationale is George F. Kennan. As founding director of the East European Fund, Kennan was involved in redeploying tens of thousands of Nazis and Eastern European war criminals, for instance, the Croatian Ustashi, into the United States. EEF's creation in 1951 coincided with a change in immigration laws permitting unrestricted immigration from the so-called, quote, captive nations, unquote, and the lapse of laws banning the entrance of war criminals. The ensuing hordes of second and third level fascist thugs and murderers obtained immediate employment with firms that had been cartel partners of IG Farben and other Nazi industrialists, including Ford, General Motors, DuPont, General Electric, Firestone Rubber, and others who used the war criminals as in-plant capos, security personnel, etc. The Rockefeller Group Field Commanders. Robert Murphy has been involved in almost every Die Spinne operation as the State Department's main fascist troubleshooter. Today, he is principal coordinator of the Die Spinne reactivation, both as head of the Intelligence Oversight Board and as a senior member of the Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. Beginning as Secretary of State Cordell Hull's main intelligence liaison with the Vichy government, Murphy was picked by Roosevelt in 1941 to oversee OSS operations in North Africa, where, after a period of direct collaboration with fascists such as Admiral Darlan, he attempted to create a counterfeit, quote, Free French movement to contain and destroy de Gaulle. As civilian advisor to General Eisenhower during the peace negotiations with King Victor Emmanuel's Italian government in 1943, Murphy stated that he was, quote, greatly relieved that there were no restrictions on our dealing with members of the fascist party. For example, Army Chief Pietro Badoglio, Mussolini's conqueror of Abyssinia, as a counter to the communist resistance. As civilian advisor to General Clay, post-war military governor of West Germany until 1949, Murphy drowned the denazification program in a morass of red tape, while neo-Nazi groups organized openly, obtaining 6% of the vote with the 1949 Bundestag elections. In 1958, John Foster and Allen Dulles appointed Murphy, then Deputy Undersecretary of State, to oversee the U.S. invasion of Lebanon, where he worked with associates in Aramco corporate intelligence to build up the Lebanese Phalange and allied fascist organizations as a buffer against the Iraqi Ba'athist Party, which threatened Rockefeller oil interests. Serafino Romaldi is a rabidly anti-communist right-wing social democrat who during World War II served as a top CIA traveling agent for Nelson Rockefeller. Romaldi maintained liaison with both right-wing socialist exiles and Nazi enclaves in the southern cone of Latin America. After the war, Romaldi was appointed American Federation of Labor field representative in Latin America, sponsored by Rockefeller labor flunky David Dubinsky of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. He later served as head of the AFL-CIO Latin American operations under Old Boy Die Spinne coordinator Jay Lovestone, executive director of the AFL-CIO International Department. using right-wing Cuban Social Democrats for a base. Right-wing Cuban Social Democrats. Okay, I don't know about. Okay, all right. Such as Carlos Prio Socaras, Aureliano Sanchez Arango, Manuel Antonio de Varona, and others who were to gain international notoriety as CIA Gusano leaders during the Bay of Pigs. Romaldi unleashed a bloodbath against communist cadre of the Latin American Trade Union Confederation in several nations, permitting him to form a puppet Latin American trade union known as the Inter-American Regional Organization of Workers in 1948. To accomplish this, Romaldi's operatives formed a so-called Caribbean Legion, which was armed with German weapons from Nazis in Argentina, and which was used in numerous CIA Spinne paramilitary operations, including the 1954 coup against the pro-Soviet Guatemalan government of Jacobo Arbenz. After the Bay of Pigs fiasco, Romaldi was named founding director of the American Institute of Free Labor Development, which has trained corporatist labor leaders throughout the continent, many of them complicit in USAID Latin American death squads and CIA military operations. Intelligence control officers. Frank Wisner, as CIA Deputy Director of Plans under Dulles, personally oversaw formation of Gehlen Organization's Special Forces in 1952-3 and the 1954 Guatemalan coup with Tracy Barnes, Serafino Romaldi, David Phillips, and E. Howard Hunt. Wisner worked in the OSS under Dulles in World War II, active in Romania and Turkey. He was a lawyer from 1945 to 7 with Carter, Ledyard, and Milburn, whose clients included Standard Oil. He was handpicked by Allen Dulles, General George Marshall, and Secretary of War James Forrestal to head the Office of Policy Coordination. A covert action CIA formed during the post-war faction fight for control over intelligence, committed suicide in 1958. And there's a long story about Frank Wisner we'll have to get into one day. I don't think that James Forrestal was ever Secretary of War. He was the Secretary of the Navy, after which he became the Secretary of Defense. But that's a minor error, I think. Kermit Roosevelt, aka Mr. Iran, organized with Herbert Hoover Jr., and Herbert Hoover Jr. is somebody David Underdown's been looking into, really interesting and dark character. The 1953 coup against Mossadegh government in Iran, which had threatened nationalization of Seven Sisters oil holdings, Roosevelt organized with Miles Copeland, Yamar Shakht, and others the 1952 coup that installed Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt, using the Gehlen Organization and Skorzeni's ADSAP for post-coup training of the Egyptian military and Egyptian intelligence. Roosevelt became director, quote, government relations for Gulf Oil, 1958 to 60, and vice president from 1960 to 64. Next, we come to one of my father's real enemies, Richard Bissell. Assistant to Dulles, 1954 to 59, Deputy Director of Plans, 1959 to 62. Bissell oversaw Bay of Pigs fiasco and formation of Gusano terrorist network. He was a Ford Foundation director from 1952 to 54. He has been Director of Economic Planning for United Aircraft Corporation since 1964 and also a Director of the Mutual Insurance Company of Hartford. He is a consultant to numerous firms such as Pratt & Whitney, a division of United Aircraft through which he organized gun running operations to the Lebanese Phalange. Bissell is a member of the New York Council on Foreign Relations. Robert Amory, Jr., Dulles' CIA Deputy Director for Intelligence, a member of the National Security Council Planning Board. Amory is a scion of the Boston patrician Amory family, which owned one of the original Fabian disinformation rags, the new republic. He is a member of the law firm of Corcoran, Youngman and Rao. Corcoran, I think, is Tommy Corcoran, if I'm not mistaken. A key intersection point for corporate and government Spinne operations in Latin America and Asia. CYR clients have included the Rockefeller's United Fruit Company, Claire Chennault's Flying Tigers, Taiwan dictator Chiang Kai-shek, Chinese banker and Standard Oil partner TV Sung, a co-founder of the anti-communist China lobby with Henry and Claire Booth Luce. Amory's personal clients include the Korean Cultural and Freedom Foundation, headed by Colonel Bo Hai Pak, who was Korean CIA controller of Reverend Sun Myung Moon, and a co-founder of the World Anti-Communist League. Tracy Barnes, head of the domestic branch of the CIA, who worked with his covert operations assistant E. Howard Hunt to redeploy Bay of Pigs and other CIA undesirables into the Minutemen and related paramilitary right-wing organizations in the U.S. A relative of the Rockefellers by marriage, Barnes worked in the OSS under Dulles in Switzerland. Senior CIA officer under the Deputy Director of Plans Frank Wisner, directing the 1954 Guatemalan coup. Barnes was stationed in West Germany with the Gehlen Organization for the 1956 Hungarian Revolt. He was the briefing officer to Adlai Stevenson and the State Department during the Bay of Pigs. Well, I'm just looking to see how much we still haven't covered, and I'm going to say we haven't covered about half of it. So we're going to have to take another look at this article. Let me just, for the record, I'm stopping at page 4, and we will pick it up there with E. Howard Hunt the next time we get together for studying this material. But before I run out of time this morning, I wanted to get back over to you guys and see what you've been chatting about while I've been busy reading. Okay. Corky Goss, I need redundancy. I do too. That's what this is really helping me to just read through all of this stuff. Okay. And oil was completely surpassable by alchemy. All right. Oh boy, we got a troll. I didn't know that. Here. Did Reinhard Gehlen create an international secret spy agency? Yeah, I'd say so. Secret Team by Prouty, one of my core books. You've got to read Secret Team, or at least listen to me. I digest it for about 2 or 3 hours on my. If you look on my playlists on my YouTube channel, you can hear my 1 hour version of it. But it's really worth studying very, very intently. That book, Secret Team by Fletcher Prouty. Victor Emmanuel claims to be relatives to Fabius the Delayer. Huh. Victor Emmanuel family. They're from Savoy, which was an independent kingdom off and on during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Pompeo is treating away. Okay. Kate Godina says, wait till the fall. Yeah, I'm going to have to try another crop this fall. I think I just didn't know enough about growing kale and just threw the seeds in the ground and hope for the best. They're about 6 or 7 inches high. Let's see. Okay, so there's not a whole lot of chat. I guess you guys were listening, and that's a good thing. Well, spread the word, folks. The Spinne is real. It is the model for Spectre in the James Bond books, and there's a lot more truth in the James Bond stories than people have been led to believe. It's not a fantasy. And the more that we study Scorsese, Galen, um, Frank Wisner, all of these knuckleheads from the OSO social OSS, um, they're all little puppets of the great Rockefeller machine, which of course is also a puppet of an even bigger machine. But that's a story for another day. Tomorrow night, I'll have the great Mark Kulak with me from Housatonic Live, and we'll catch up with his work and talk about how to avoid the disaster that they seem to have planned for us. So that'll be a great talk. Wednesday night duo with Mark, and get rid of this troll, and we'll be done.